How many of the knives sitting on your workbench right now did you make worse the last time somebody online told you they'd found the clever way to do it? Be honest. You saw a knife with paint poured over it, the rust vanishing under a wave of black, and something in you thought maybe that was the shortcut you'd been waiting for. Maybe that was the thing that would let you skip the sandpaper and the elbow grease and the fear of ruining a blade that meant something. My name is Walt Rennick. I'm 71 years old. I learned to clean steel in my grandfather's shop when I was 9, and I spent 34 years as a tool and die maker in a factory in Ohio before I retired. Since then, I've restored old pocket knives and kitchen knives for the people who own them. About 9,000 blades have crossed this bench. I don't sell knives. I give them back. And in the next 20 minutes, I'm going to give you 8 things: how to read what's actually happening on that blade, which paint trick is real and which is theater, how to stop rust without touching bare metal, how to clean an edge without killing it, how to handle a stamped tang, how to treat bone and stag, how to protect what you saved, and one last method that costs almost nothing and has saved more knives on this bench than everything else combined. Here's the part nobody tells you first. The rust is not your enemy, the sandpaper is. And the paint, in one specific form, is not a gimmick at all. It's chemistry that conservators have used for decades, just dressed up in a costume for a silent video. That's the trouble with those videos. Hundreds of millions of people have watched a rusty knife turn into a chrome mirror with no word spoken. What they never show you is the damage, the maker's stamp ground off with a belt. The edge overheated on a wheel until the temper was gone. A factory satin finish polished to a mirror it never had from the day it was made. Original bone handles swapped for colored resin because resin films better. Pretty silence, and the value of the piece destroyed on camera in a way that can never be walked back. I attack the method here, not the men. But the method deserves it. I earned the right to say that the hard way. For my first 11 years, I used a bench grinder on carbon steel. 80 grit paper, a drill with a wire wheel, vinegar left in the jar overnight, and once, God help me, motor oil off the garage floor. I think about the knives I ruined more than the ones I saved. My grandfather told me something I've repeated for 40 years. You can always take more steel off tomorrow. You can never put it back. If you've got a knife you inherited and have been afraid to touch, tell me down below what it is and what's stamped on the tang. I read those. And keep that 8th method in the back of your mind because it's the cheapest thing I'll say all day and the one I'd hand to a beginner before anything else. Let's start where you should start. Not with the paint. With the diagnosis. The single most expensive mistake I see is treating all rust as one thing. It isn't. There are 2 kinds of oxide on that blade, and they are opposites. Red rust is hydrated iron oxide. It's porous, it's loose, and it's alive. It keeps eating the steel underneath it 24 hours a day, whether you look at it or not. Left in a damp basement, a spot of red rust the size of a pinhead will spread to the size of a dime in a season. Black patina is different. It's magnetite. It's stable, it's tight, it bonds to the metal, and it actually protects what's underneath. Old-timers called it a knife's coat. The whole goal of a correct restoration is usually to convert the red into black, not to grind down to shiny bare metal. Once you understand that, half the internet's advice falls apart. You can feel the difference under your thumb, and I want you to actually do this. Red rust drags like fine sand, catches on the ridges of your skin. Black patina is smooth as a river stone, nothing to snag on. Do it in raking light too, low and from the side, because pitting throws a shadow that a straight-on look hides. The cost of getting this wrong is simple. Sand a stable knife to bare steel, and you've stripped off the one layer that was keeping it alive, and now you've got to protect it artificially for the rest of its life. A published source you can lean on here is the Canadian Conservation Institute's notes on the care of metal objects, which draw exactly this line between active and stable corrosion. Learn to tell them apart, and you've already passed the test. Most of those videos fail in their first 10 seconds. Now, the paint. This is what the title promised, and I won't leave it hanging. There is a real technique hiding under the theater. It's called a poultice, or in the honest version, a tannic acid conversion coating. You mix tannic acid into a thin paste, sometimes with a little clay or cellulose fiber to hold it against the steel, and you brush it over the rust. It looks like you're painting the blade black. What's actually happening is chemistry. The tannic acid reacts with the iron oxide and the iron itself to form iron tannate, a stable blue-black compound. It converts the active red rust into a passive black layer, the same magnetite-like protection you'd have gotten from decades of honest use. That's the trick. Not a coating that hides the rust, a reaction that neutralizes it. The commercial rust converters at the hardware store, the ones that turn brown metal black, are the same idea with a phosphoric acid base doing the converting. So when you see paint poured on a knife and the rust vanishes into black, that's not magic and it's not fraud. It's a conversion coating older than the men who film it. But here's what the silent video will never tell you about that paint. And this is the part that matters. You have to wipe the excess back to a thin film, or it dries into a crusted skin that flakes and takes good patina with it. It does nothing for the shape of a pitted blade. The pits are still there under the black, and if anything, the color makes them easier to ignore, and it belongs on a rough working tool, not on a collectible you'd rather see cleaned properly. Use it on a barn-fine butcher knife, the kind that spent 40 years cutting hog and never saw a display case, not on your grandfather's case. On a collectible, converting the whole blade to black flat kills the value the same way a mirror polish does, just quieter. The tannic poultice is a tool. Like every tool on this bench, it's right for one job and wrong for the next one over. Let me stop here for a second. What I just walked you through, the difference between red and black oxide and the chemistry of a conversion coating, is one page of chapter 4 of a book I put together called The Restorer'S Bench. There are 11 more chapters. It runs 158 pages, 12 chapters, and it's organized by the decision you're facing, not by some tool list. Inside there are the bench cards you can prop up next to the vise, a safety card, and an index arranged by symptoms, so you look up what the knife is doing and it tells you where to turn. The point of all of it is that the knife in your drawer, tonight you'll actually know what it is and where to stop. The link is in the description and the QR code is on screen. This is the night you stop being afraid of that drawer. Third thing, and it follows straight from the paint, if you don't want to convert the rust, if you want it gone entirely, the safe agent is a weak acid that eats oxide and then stops. Citric acid is the one I reach for. 90 cents of citric acid powder from the grocery baking aisle, the same stuff used in canning, a tablespoon in a cup of warm water, and you soak the blade 15 to 30 minutes. It dissolves the red rust and leaves the sound steel largely alone because once the oxide is gone, the reaction slows to a crawl. Compare that to vinegar left overnight, which is 5% acetic acid. It attacks the rust, and then when the rust runs out, it keeps right on going and pits your good steel. I've pulled blades out of a vinegar jar in the morning that looked worse than when they went in, the surface gone gray and frosted like the acid chewed a texture into it because it had. Check the blade every 10 minutes, pull it, rinse it, look at it, put it back if it needs more. Wear gloves, work with a window open, and when you're done, neutralize the blade with a little baking soda and water because any acid left down in the pits keeps working after you've set the knife down to dry. The knife you save with 90 cents is worth the same as the one you'd have paid a shop $40 to touch. Fourth, the edge. This is where the grinders do the damage that can't be undone. Heat kills temper. Tempering is the low-temperature bake done after hardening that trades away a little hardness for the toughness that keeps an edge from chipping. It lives in the steel as an invisible property, and heat erases it without leaving a mark you'd notice until the blade fails. Here's the number that matters, and it's written on the steel in color if you know to look. If you see the metal change color while you're working an edge, straw yellow around 400 degrees, bronze and purple climbing up, blue around 550. That thin edge has already lost its hardness permanently. The edge is the thinnest part of the whole knife, so it heats first and fastest before the thick spine has warmed at all. A wire wheel on a bench grinder brings a fine edge to that blue in seconds, faster than your eye catches it, so you keep the edge cool. Handwork or a slow speed with water running, and you touch the metal to your fingers often. If it's too hot to hold against your skin, it's already too hot for the steel because your skin gives up around 140 degrees and the damage starts far above that, but the habit keeps you honest. Work in short passes and let it rest between them. On a case Huixi from before 1965, back when they were still stamping chrome vanadium carbon steel instead of the true sharp stainless that came later, that heat-ruined edge is the difference between a knife worth restoring and a knife worth nothing. And you can't sand the blue away and fix it. The color is just the sign. The softness underneath is the wound. Fifth, the tang stamp, and this is the one that separates a restorer from a wrecker. The tang is the part of the blade that disappears into the handle. The maker's mark, the pattern number, and the date code all live there, or on the ricasso just ahead of it, which is the flat, unsharpened stretch of blade between the edge and the handle. That stamp is the value. It's the fingerprint. Lightly clean it, never grind it, because a wire wheel or a belt flattens those tiny stamped letters in one pass and there is no getting them back. The stamp is only a few thousandths of an inch deep to begin with, shallower than the thickness of a sheet of paper, so it doesn't take much to erase 100 years of identity. I flattened a tang stamp on a Winchester once, early on, took a wire wheel right across it without thinking, and turned a knife a collector would have paid real money for into a generic old blade worth a tenth of that. I still have it in a drawer as a reminder. The National Knife Collectors Association will tell you the same thing. Identification is most of the value, and it lives in a spot the size of your fingernail. Around it, you work by hand with a rag and a little oil and a toothpick or a sharpened piece of brass to lift crud out of the letters, and nothing else. Never anything spinning, never anything with a grit number. I'll be straight with you. What fits in 20 minutes here is a sample. What's written down is the whole thing. The book runs 12 chapters, each one built around a decision you're standing in front of at the bench, set in large type because I know who I made it for, and I'm tired of squinting myself. Every technique in it can be done on a bench that cost under $40 with no machinery at all. Nothing in there needs a grinder or a buffing wheel. Here's the part I'm proudest of. Every technique carries a check me line with a published dated source behind it. National Park Service Conservo-Gram, the Canadian Conservation Institute, the ASM Handbook. You don't take my word, you check the work. There's a 60-day guarantee on it, so the risk sits with me and not with you. And if you've been watching this thinking about a knife that outlived the man who carried it, that's who I wrote it for. You'll find it linked below the video, same place as the QR, that's all I'll say about it. Sixth, the handle. Bone, stag, and antler do not get wet and do not get warm, they crack. Those materials moved with moisture and heat when they were part of a living animal, and old and dry they've lost the give, so a soak swells them and a dry out shrinks them, and the material splits along its length to relieve the stress. I've seen a beautiful stag handle split down its whole length because a man ran his knife under hot tap water to speed things up. You clean natural handle material with mineral oil on a rag, worked in slow, and that feeds the material as it cleans. That's it. Nothing soaks, nothing gets warm. And there's a specific trap on old pocket knives you have to know about because it explains rust that looks like it came from nowhere. Celluloid handles, common on knives made before about 1950, degrade with age no matter how you store them. As the celluloid breaks down, it gives off nitrous vapors, and those vapors rust the blade of that knife and every blade stored in the same box or drawer beside it. That's the real cause of a lot of the mystery rust collectors find on old pieces sitting together. Red bloom on a knife that was clean last year. If a handle smells faintly of camphor or old mothballs, that's celluloid outgassing, and that knife needs to be pulled out and stored on its own, away from the others, before it takes them all down with it. Seventh, Protection, which is the whole point of the work. A stripped blade with no oxide on it at all is bare and hungry, and it will flash rust in a humid garage in a matter of days, sometimes overnight if the air is wet enough. Bare clean steel wants to go back to being rust, that's the natural direction, and your job at the end is to stand in its way. So the last thing you do is put a barrier back on the steel. A film of food-grade mineral oil for a knife that goes back to the kitchen and touches food, wiped on and wiped nearly off so only the thinnest layer stays. A microcrystalline wax, the kind conservators use on museum metal, for a display piece. It goes on thin, you let it haze, and you buff it to a soft glow that lasts a year or more without attention. If you converted the rust to black patina instead of stripping it, you've already got most of that protection built into the surface, which is the whole argument for leaving the black alone in the first place. Skip this step and every hour you spend is undone by the weather inside a week. The cost of forgetting it is starting the entire job over from the beginning. And now the eighth, the one I've been holding since the top. The cheapest, the simplest, and the one that has saved more knives on this bench than any acid or wax or paint I've ever reached for. It isn't a chemical, and it isn't a tool you can buy. It's a diagnosis you do before you touch anything, and the only tools are your own 2 hands and 10 minutes of doing nothing. You stop. You put the knife down in good light and you don't pick up a single abrasive. You find the tang stamp and you write down exactly what it says, letter for letter, and if you don't know it, you look it up before you go further. You run your thumb over the rust and decide red or black, active or stable. Then you decide before anything comes off whether this knife wants to be cleaned to bare metal, converted to black, or left almost exactly as it is with nothing more than oil. Most knives that get ruined in the first 5 minutes by a man who started working before he decided what he was doing, who reached for the sandpaper because his hands were bored. The stop is the method. Everything else on this bench is just carrying out a decision, and if the decision is wrong, the finest technique in the world only helps you ruin the knife more neatly. I ruined knives for 11 years because I skipped this. The ones I've saved since, I saved by sitting on my hands and thinking first. It costs nothing. It saved more steel than everything else on this bench put together. If there's a tool or a trick I left out, one you've used and trust, put it down below. I read every one. Next time I'm going to take apart the electrolysis tank step by step in a video called The Salvage Tank, Reversing Rust Without Removing Metal, and I'll show you why electrolysis reduces the oxide back toward iron instead of tearing it off, why it takes no base metal with it, and why the anode has to be mild steel and never stainless. Because stainless releases hexavalent chromium into the bath, and that is genuinely dangerous to breathe and to pour out. Remember the mirror, remember the silent video and the $200 kit and the belt sander screaming across a tang stamp. That's not restoration, that's destruction with good lighting. Here's the whole thing in 2 lines. The rust tells you what the knife needs if you'll read it before you reach for the sandpaper. And you can always take more steel off tomorrow, but you can never put it back. Diagnose the rust red against black for nothing. Convert it with a tannic poultice, a couple of dollars. Dissolve it with citric acid, 90 cents. Keep the edge cool, free. Save the tang stamp, priceless and gone in one pass. Oil the bone, $1 of mineral oil. Protect the steel, a smear of wax. And stop before you start, which costs 10 minutes and nothing else. Call it $3 in materials, all in. Against that, a knife your grandfather carried, kept whole instead of ground down to a stranger nobody can identify. That's the trade. $3 or the thing itself. The mirror finish costs you the knife. It just doesn't tell you that while the music plays.